All right. Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to our first masterclass in 2022. The video you just saw is Hulk's official music video titled What About You? So I hope you did like it. My name is Abdullah Ghadir. I'll be your host for tonight, and I'm based out of the Dubai campus. Joining us from across the planet, Professor Matt Fisher, who teaches primarily out of the San Francisco campus. He is currently working on a case study, a very interesting case study that centers on the cryptocurrency marketplace, Coinbase. So I hope you can share some information with us on that, Professor, later on. Professor Fisher aims to provide an objective evaluation of cryptocurrency opportunities and constraints. And I've always wanted to say this, but there will be no financial advice in this masterclass, since our only purpose is educational. All right, before we begin, a little bit of housekeeping. The masterclass will go for approximately 45 minutes. If you got any questions, please drop them in the Q&A chat box, bottom right. We will have time at the end of this session to address them. If you did miss anything or need to go for a short break during the live session, do not worry. The recording will be shared with you in a few days. All right, without further ado, Professor, the stage is yours, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for the introduction, and I love the fact that everybody is seemingly introducing themselves into the chat box. It's one of my favorite things of doing these, just getting to see where everybody's from. As I'm, especially right now, as I'm at home here right now, I feel like I'm with you guys around the world, so it just makes for a fun thing here. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and let's go ahead and dive in here. So our topic here today, of course, is we're going to be talking about cryptocurrency, which you all are familiar with since you signed up for the masterclass here. So, and as was noted, I am currently in the process of writing and about to send off for review and publication a case study on Coinbase. So this is an organization, trading marketplace platform for digital assets as well as cryptocurrency. But today we're going to be talking about more, in the limited time that we have, some of the larger issues around cryptocurrency and not necessarily getting down to the nitty gritty of hashes and mining and all that sort of stuff. So I think one of the questions that we really want to start off with here is, this cryptocurrency is something that, at least on global consumer behavior studies, we find that there's about 94% awareness of what cryptocurrency is, that people have at least heard of it. So as a new phenomena, this is really something kind of exciting and a bit of a curiosity that it's really taken hold and very, very quickly has resulted in a lot of interest in this new kind of financial asset. But a question remains is this the future? One of the things that I oftentimes will refer to whenever we talk about prognostications of the future, that on one hand, technology and the promises of change are always kind of exciting. However, I like to oftentimes quote that I think that we should have kind of a optimistic skepticism. And I say this because famed venture capitalist Peter Thiel, in his way of summing up a lot of the technology sector's promises of this grandiose future, is they promised us flying cars, but all we got was 140 characters. And now granted, that's a statement that he made several years ago, but the idea that the technology sector has been promising that flying cars would be ubiquitous since the 1950s. And we're still waiting for them, even though there are some firms trying to do it. It never really seems to quite take off. So we always need to be excited about the future, but we also need to be a little skeptical about it. And so the case for crypto, first off, let's start off with just some of the general reasons why you might want to be interested in cryptocurrency. And again, this is cryptocurrency in general. Number one, it's decentralized. Now, this is one of the primary arguments in favor of cryptocurrency. When we say decentralization, the idea that the supply of money itself is not controlled by governments or central banks. And this case for decentralization largely arises out of a fear that governments might decide to print money and potentially devalue their currency. Now, this fear of devaluation goes all the way back to Adam Smith and the Inquiry into Wealth of Nations from 1776. In fact, the opening chapters of Adam Smith's Enquiry into the Wealth of Nations is an account of various kind of Middle Ages monarchs who, while they needed to borrow, gold to finance wars and whatnot, they also had the power to mint coins. And the coins were supposed to be tied to a certain amount of gold. But then some of these monarchs who were really, really deep in debt, particularly there was a French monarch who really did this. He's like, wait a second, if the gold is supposed to be, the coin is supposed to represent a certain amount of gold, and I'm the one who has control over this, what if I were to just put less gold in each coin? And that's something that he did. And so it ended up having a significant impact on the economy. And so Adam Smith is basically, arguing about governments eroding and impacting their economies. Secondly, we have a limited supply. In that, Bitcoin, which is one I'm going to focus on a little bit here today, is the fact that Bitcoin is limited to, I think it's 18 million Bitcoins. That's all there's going to be. That's all there's ever going to be. And so that can result in what we call deflationary pressures. The idea that once there's a fixed amount of currency, if there needs to be, if there's more economic activity or more interest to buy a particular goods or service, you can't change the money itself. You can't just make the supply bigger because it's now fixed. So the idea is that then this might actually result in prices coming down because the money itself is more valuable. And then we also have time and transaction costs. And this is probably the strongest argument in favor of cryptocurrency. And this is one where if you happen to be an individual and you send money internationally and cross currency, you already know that it takes time for transactions to clear, and there's also significant kind of costs to parties that are willing to change your dollars for euros, or euros for baht, or whatever type of currency it is. And so this one is probably the strongest argument in favor of crypto, but it's the least sexy argument, because some folks who might be in countries where they don't travel a lot, they're like, well, I don't send money international, so that one doesn't really resonate with me. But those are kind of the main planks for the case of cryptocurrency. Now, if you want to get cryptocurrency, you can decide. Oh, somebody just corrected me. It's 21 million. My apologies. I said 18, and they're correct. It is 21 million. So here's a quick little, just a quick little snapshot of basically a bunch of equipment rigged together to go with the idea that it's going to mine cryptocurrency for whatever it is. And so I just threw this one in here real quickly, in that this desire to get access to crypto coins can be done through mining, and this is through putting a bunch of computer technology together where it's going to basically run these algorithms and make guesses for the, before I get too complex here, basically think of it like as a puzzle that the computer is going to try to solve, but it's extremely complex and it takes a long time. And so you need to have more and more powerful machinery to go ahead and do this. And if your rig or your computer technology guesses it correctly, you get rewarded with a Bitcoin. So basically, or whatever cryptocurrency you're mining for. So those who have access to a lot of computer hardware are enticed by the promise of basically just, for lack of a better term, printing their own money. Even though they're not printing it, they're letting the computer do all the work. So it's like get rich quick if you've got enough technology behind you or enough hardware behind you that you can go ahead and bring this together. Now, cryptocurrencies in general, I think that I happen to like this particular infographic here because it shows the kind of explosion in growth here. So going all the way back to 2013, at the bottom there you see that Bitcoin percentage of total market cap. Bitcoin dominated the cryptocurrency landscape in 2013 with being over 92% of the market. Now, going up to 2017, and this is at least what this infographic is limited to here, shows that Bitcoin is now less than half of the market because the number of cryptocurrencies that exist have exploded. There are hundreds and hundreds of different Bitcoins. So, you got Bitcoin, you got Ethereum, you got Dogecoin, you got Shiba Inu, we can go on and on and on and on and on. And this is attracting a lot of interest. And so, as you can see, from 2013 all the way to 2017, this is some pretty impressive growth that you have here. And these growth figures continue on past 2017. This was just the best infographic that I could find to try to illustrate the point in the limited time that I have here. Now, this is a recent study done from last year, actually, that Visa invested in to see and gauge who and where the interest is in cryptocurrency. So this is actually some proprietary information I'm kind of sharing with you here that I'm using in my case study a little bit from Visa and their interest again in cryptocurrencies, and noting that awareness of cryptocurrency is huge, but the people that are actually owning it. So awareness, you see 94% there. But then of that 94%, you only have 32% that are actually participating. 21 they call active owners. These are the folks that are oftentimes either mining or the ones that are very active in trading cryptocurrency, or even advocating to try to make it commonplace so that you can buy and sell actual goods and services with cryptocurrency. And I think most everybody that's probably in the audience here today is aware that some places are starting to accept cryptocurrencies as payment for goods and services. Because if you can't actually use cryptocurrency as currency, then it kind of fails on one of its major kind of grandiose future promises, is that one day we'll be all using cryptocurrency for anything and everything. And so that's kind of a major promise that it kind of needs to live up to, and one of the things that we're going to kind of evaluate just a little bit as we get a little further in here. Now, these 11% passive owners, these are folks who maybe they own just a little bit of crypto. They don't really know a lot of what to do with it, and maybe they could become really active traders at some point, but they own a little bit. They're not there. The next category there, the one that's highlighted in gold, 21%. This is the one that, like, for the case study that I'm writing on Coinbase, this is their target market. If you're crypto.com, if you're FTX, if you're Coinbase, or any of these platforms, who are they fixated on? They're fixated on this 21%. The idea that these are some folks that are interested in crypto, maybe they don't quite understand it quite yet, but they've heard a lot of hype about it. And in fact, I would guess that probably even a few of you here might fall into that category of curious on it, like, I've heard a lot about it, don't actually own a lot of it yet, but maybe. Then you've got the unengaged and the skeptics, and notice that that's 37 and 11%. That's still quite a number of folks who are not on board with this. So I thought that these figures would be interesting to give you an idea. This is the state of the market right now, and this also goes a long way to explaining why, if you've been paying attention to the news, a lot of these crypto, there's not only the cryptocurrencies themselves, but then the trading platforms, which again is the one that I'm writing the case study on, is the trading platform. They're pouring vast amounts of money trying to promote and get people excited about cryptocurrency because they want to get more people into the market. Now, why do they want to do this? Well, number one, if you're a trading platform, how do you make money? You make money by people trading. So you want people trading the heck out of it, or you want people buying and selling stuff. You want people using the currency because you make money by transaction fees, kind of like credit card companies. They make most of their money from the swipes. Every time you swipe and every time you buy something, that merchant pays a fee for credit cards usage. And so the credit card companies, yes, they can make money if you rack up a credit card balance and you don't pay it off. Of course, you're going to have a high interest rate, but they make the most from their transaction fees. And so that's what these trading platforms, that's what they're after. That's why they want to get these curious people into the marketplace. If they get more people into the marketplace and you have a limited number of actual cryptocurrency coins, the larger the marketplace with a limited supply of coins, it's just going to make the value go up. So there's a huge impetus for these companies and these currencies to try to get more people into the pool of, at the very minimum, passive owners, because that will start to inflate or push the value up. And so they have an interest in doing that. And that's why you see some of these kind of outlandish deals. I think Crypto.com just recently sponsored a sports stadium in the United States. The NBA signed a deal with Coinbase to be a sponsor. So suddenly Coinbase is now going to be with NBA basketball teams all over the place. Now, the argument also that we have here is that we want to understand that the idea that governments and central banks might devalue their currency, where does this kind of fear come from? And is it a justified fear? Well, if you're wealthy and you're sitting on a vast pile of wealth, you oftentimes want to protect that wealth. And if the money that you have if the money supply itself is going to increase and you have a fixed amount of money, even though you've got a lot of it, it's, in theory, it's going to devalue the big pile of money that you have. So a lot of very wealthy people have a kind of fear and interest in maintaining a limited money supply. They have an interest in that. And these fears come back again and again and again and again. So there was a big interest in investments in gold during the Great Recession. Why? Because governments were printing more money and putting stimulus payments out, to try to shore up the economy after basically the housing market collapse. You then also have here with COVID-19, governments putting out money for, governments injecting money to try to stabilize and keep people solvent. So bartenders and waiters and whatnot who suddenly found themselves, out of work because of COVID-19 lockdowns, instead of having them be destitute, governments have been, basically printing money and giving stimulus payments to kind of keep things afloat here. Well, if you're a wealthy person, that's increasing the money supply, and you might be afraid that that's going to result in just this rampant inflation. Now, the question is, are these fears actually real or not? Well, cryptocurrency doesn't really care. Cryptocurrency and wealthy people and technologists, they have an interest in getting you into cryptocurrency and using cryptocurrency to inflate the asset value there. However, are these inflationary risks justified? Well, most everybody right now realizes that inflation is higher than it's been in decades in most places of the world right now because of some of the COVID-19 lockdowns. However, after the Great Recession, there's always been a little bit of inflation, but many of these doom and gloom projections that oftentimes some wealthy folks have really advocated for have never actually come to pass. They're like, oh, inflation's going to be rampant because the governments are printing all this money, but then you look at inflation and be like 1-2%. You're like, well, that's not really the doom and gloom that you were predicting. But they never go back and actually reconcile that. They're like, oh, never mind. The next doom and gloom is coming here, so believe me. So why do you want to have an interest in crypto? Well, the data shows that there's 3 primary drivers as to why anybody is interested in cryptocurrency. Number 1, there's this idea that this is the wave of the future, that you want to be part of this, is it being part of the financial way of the future. That's the actual quote from the Visa study on consumer behavior. So I put FOMO there, fear of missing out. So some of you might even be here today being like, hey, I don't know a lot about crypto. I want to come in here and just, get a perspective on it. Maybe you're interested in it. Why do you need it? Maybe you don't send money internationally, but you're kind of like, hey, I don't want to miss out on what this new thing is. Secondly, the idea to build wealth and diversify your investments. Well, here's the thing. Yes, there are lots of stories of how things like, Bitcoin went from being around $13 to, in this last year, topping around $69,000 for a single Bitcoin. So some people definitely become extremely wealthy off of cryptocurrencies. The question is, though, going forward, is this going to continue to happen? And that's where I'm going to probably throw a little cold water on this one here in a few slides. So the people that were really early on this train, yes, they have built vast amounts of wealth. The question is now, how about for the rest of us? Can you join this a little bit later? And is this going to make you wildly wealthy? And if this is going to make you wildly wealthy, then we have to step back and ask ourselves a quick question here. It's called cryptocurrency. Are you investing in the currency of your local country with the idea of getting wealthy, or are you using it as actual currency, meaning that it's a unit of accounting, a medium of exchange, and a store of value? one of the things you typically don't want with a currency from an economics perspective is you don't want your currency vastly, a highly volatile currency. That's not usually good for your economy. But again, people are oftentimes looking to these cryptocurrencies, the idea that they're going to get rich. So the third one here, and I mentioned this a little bit before, transaction freedom and lower fees. The idea is really quick and it's really easy to send money across borders. That one is probably the strongest one, but that's actually the third, and the other two are the more popular responses of what people are actually thinking about when it comes to crypto. But the third one is probably the strongest one. Now, the risks in cryptocurrency, and I think this is one of the things that's probably most important here. Number one, price volatility. The idea that cryptocurrency, at least with Bitcoin, you could have had it at $13, I think back in 2013. Like I said, I think it topped out around 69,000 for a single Bitcoin here this last year. Again, as the money itself, the Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency coin, the price of that coin fluctuates tremendously. If you're supposed to use this to buy, soda pop and groceries and, maybe shirts, if you're going to use it for actual goods and services, if the value of that money is going to be wildly fluctuating, then if you're a seller of goods and services, you need to kind of anticipate some of this volatility. So if a currency is typically going to fluctuate just a little bit, and you're currently, as you have international sellers, if you're in one country, you're going to export your goods to another country, sell the good, get the currency, and then bring it back to your home country, and you know that the currency is going to fluctuate a little bit in foreign exchange markets, you're usually going to raise the price enough to absorb that fluctuation in prices. Or you're going to try to do a currency forward swap. That's more beyond the scope of this class here. So a little bit of fluctuation, you're going to put your price of your product or service high enough to absorb that, because you're like, hey, I've got actual costs here. I can't be gambling on the value of the currency for the price of the, if I'm going to sell shirts, there's a certain, I have to pay for the actual inputs, and I have to pay for the labor and all this stuff. I've got actual real costs here. I want to sell shirts. I don't want to be gambling on currency. So this price volatility is a real problem if you want cryptocurrency to be really truly mainstream. Secondly, cryptocurrencies overwhelmingly are built on blockchain technology. Now, way beyond what I can get into here in a short period here, but advocates of blockchain talk about its safety. And in fact, there's a white paper on Bitcoin explaining how unlikely it is that the blockchain could be overtaken by bad actors trying to commit fraud. But in this day and age of technology and the internet, where sometimes actual state actors, actual governments can sponsor technology groups to be bad actors, don't ever underestimate these folks. And there have been examples where the blockchain has been overwhelmed. It's literally known as a 51% attack. The idea that the bad actors get enough technology computing power together that they can overwhelm the blockchain, that then they can basically commit fraud. These have happened before. So blockchain is actually a little bit less secure than your traditional currencies in most countries. So the third one is criminal activity. Now, one of the things that some of the biggest advocates of cryptocurrencies tends to be, now granted you have kind of political philosophy libertarians who don't like government, but then you also have criminal actors. They love themselves some cryptocurrency because it tends to be anonymous and they can get away scot-free. So one of the things that kind of erodes some of the legitimacy of cryptocurrency is these criminal actors. It's like if you want to do money laundering, you want to do all kinds of things that are generally either illegal or unethical, cryptocurrency seems to be your best friend for that. The next one is the environmental issue, and that is the reason I showed the picture of all that computer and wires in that earlier slide is to show that you got all these people putting together all of this equipment to try to mine coins, But this devours a tremendous amount of electricity. And because of that, in some countries, the governments are actually starting to step in and ban crypto mining activities. China, and there's some others that are starting to go into because they're starting to find out that in some countries they're actually starting to have brownouts because these people trying to, basically harness computer technology equipment to make themselves rich is overwhelming their electrical grid and the electricity that they have available, and regular people and businesses and hospitals and all that stuff. They're like, whoa, we don't have enough electricity here because somebody's trying to get rich. Lastly, and this is probably one of the biggest ones, and this goes back to one of the earlier slides, which is fragmentation. We started off, and I even myself keep saying Bitcoin because that is the dominant one. It's the first one. It's the most high profile one. But now there are hundreds and hundreds of cryptocurrencies out there. Pretty much if you have access to enough resources and computing equipment itself, you basically can create your own currency. And if you can create your own currency and get enough people to actually use it, well, now you have hundreds of these currencies. So if there's hundreds of these currencies, which ones should you buy into if you're going to, say, try to get rich off of these, or want to be part of the wave of the future? This actually becomes a bit of a barrier to the future that many of these cryptocurrencies promise. This someday future utopia where we're all going to be using cryptocurrency. In fact, sometimes they make really grandiose claims like cryptocurrency is going to replace traditional currencies, in which case I generally like, whoa, slow your roll here. I mean, that's a pretty grandiose claim there. And one of the things that really kind of stands in the way of that is the fact that there's now hundreds. There's more cryptocurrencies than there is countries in the world. And so that creates this fragmentation problem. Be like, hey, if you decided to invest in, say, Shiba Inu cryptocurrency, which is really kind of started out as a joke, wasn't even an attempt at a legit thing, it was a parody, and then it kind of took off. Same thing with Dogecoin. Which one of these do you buy? Like, oh, sorry, you bought Shiba Inu coins. Yeah, we only take Dogecoin, or vice versa, or there's all these out there. So, how much of a concern is this criminal activity and fraudulent activity and hacker activity? Well, just a quick little illustration here is centralized exchanges with control, if it's a stock market or federal bank, Federal Reserve banks, central banks and whatnot, centralized exchanges, there's a little bit more control. How much, fraudulent activity has been stolen from these? Not much, at least in 2019, 2020, and 21 from the centralized exchanges. Centralized exchanges can exert control, which is, of course, contrary to one of the major promises of cryptocurrency, that it's going to be decentralized. So we already have a little bit of a problem with one of the promises here. It's supposed to be decentralized, yet there exists now some centralized exchanges, which again is contrary to what this is supposed to be. But those that are decentralized financial options there in 2021, you can see that spikes. The whole point of this slide here is to illustrate that this decentralization is oftentimes creating more opportunities for theft and bad actors to get ahead. So this notion that the world's a better place without centralization is not really finding a lot of evidence. If you want to make an argument that decentralization is desirable, you got to kind of cherry pick your data. You'd be like, no, that's not going to work for me. That's not going to work. Oh, here's one example that shows that decentralization is great. But if you take the full picture here, decentralization has almost as many bad examples as it does a couple instances where it works well. And in fact, just to kind of illustrate here, there have been coordinated hacking attacks, and here's just the 5 biggest ones from the last year. Just a list of them. And that there are coordinated attacks in which they have pierced into and penetrated and stolen money out of what we call cryptocurrency wallets. And so these are a concern, and anybody that ignores this is kind of illustrating a bit of a motivated reasoning where they've already decided that they like crypto, and so they're going to ignore the bad examples. And at least as a professor and an academic here, I remain what I call optimistically skeptical. Optimistic in that I think that there's definitely some things in cryptocurrency that is neat and exciting, and there's a technology behind it, but I'm also skeptical on it in that I don't want to be Pollyanna-ish in the idea like, oh, it's all wonderful and everything's going to be amazing. Be like, well, hold on a moment here. There's lots of examples where these things are actually getting hacked. To come back around to give you an idea on the environmental impact here and give some context, we talk about that, there's a lot of electricity usage when it comes to mining cryptocurrencies. In fact, there's, lots of examples of, sometimes even people hacking into, or governments now starting to actually ban crypto mining operations. So carbon footprint of all the and again, this is just looking at Bitcoin here. So, the carbon footprint of just Bitcoin alone is about the carbon footprint of the country of Kuwait. The electrical energy, they use as much energy for mining Bitcoin and maintaining the Bitcoin ledger is all of the country of Thailand. Electronic waste, because you're using a lot of computer technology and hardware, and sometimes that stuff just wears out, it breaks, or it becomes obsolete as new, faster stuff comes along. So more than the Netherlands. But I think what I like about this particular slide and why I included is, okay, well, that's in the big scope of things. What about on an individual level? Okay, fine. Let's rephrase that from a single Bitcoin. One single Bitcoin carbon footprint, it's the equivalent of over 2.3 million Visa credit card transactions. Or if you're going to, as I say, nearly 175,000 hours of watching video on YouTube. One Bitcoin, that's its impact. The energy consumption, equivalent to the power consumption of an average U.S. household in over 75 days. And now, one thing I should note, the United States, households notoriously electricity inefficient. So U.S. households use way more electricity than most anywhere else in the world, to the order of sometimes 4 times as much in most other countries. Electronic waste, it's significant. So these environmental impacts are real. And what's it all over? Just trying to get currency, and for many folks, they're trying to get rich. And so that creates a bit of a quandary here. Also, and this is something, as I teach a lot of marketing courses, and one of the things that I need to bring up, notice that the date on this when I snap this is from literally yesterday. Kim Kardashian and Floyd Mayweather sued over their involvement in cryptocurrency, what they call scams. Some of the tactics of many of these marketplaces, Coinbase, FTX, Crypto.com, there's tons and tons of these marketplaces, along with some of the people that are actually promoting their actual cryptocurrency itself, the ones who kind of own it and control it, they are employing some kind of shady marketing tactics that are not normally used for financial assets. And so this is the part where I'm going to bring in the skepticism here. As a marketing professor, and I also teach a lot of ethics types of courses, the track that they're using is highly, highly suspect in that they're hyping, they're promoting, and in some cases what we call a pump and dump. Get everybody excited about this, get everybody in it, and the people who already own a bunch of the coins already, they get the value to go up, and then they sell it off and leave everybody else to just pick up the pieces. And so that creates a real legit problem. And even if you are very, very already, say, pro cryptocurrency, you should be concerned about this because this erodes legitimacy. Yes, the less sophisticated folks might be like, and quite honestly, I hope to not offend anybody, but if I do, I mean this in the most offensive way possible. If you're taking financial investment advice from Kim Kardashian, you have lots of problems. Okay? But there are people out there that, they look to these celebrities and they do follow their activities. And I guess in that case, fools and their money oftentimes go separate ways. And maybe they should. But we want to understand that you do still need to be concerned about your people, about your country and whatnot. You don't want people to be, ripped off and fraud and all that sort of stuff. You kind of want there to be a fair and level playing field. Also, now granted, I focused mostly on cryptocurrency, but the blockchain, the technology that underpins a lot of cryptocurrency also goes to other types of digital assets. So cryptocurrency, one Bitcoin is the same as any other Bitcoin and has an overall value, but you could similarly use this for unique assets. So the idea, and I'm assuming that most of you have heard of NFTs, even if you don't know exactly what an NFT is, to give you an idea, it's kind of like having the rights to a uniquely digital asset. And the idea, the people who are really in favor of NFTs are like, this is a way to authenticate a claim that you own something. Like, I have this, it's mine. And the NFT is the idea that the blockchain and everything can say, hey, we know the chain of events, how party A sold it to party B, B sold it to C, C sold it to D, and now party D is trying to claim that they have the authentic thing. Well, we can look at this ledger, we can see that, okay, this is really great and awesome. But this particular guy recently, here just from a couple days ago, you notice it says January 6th, basically was hacked. His individual account was hacked, and he lost about $5 million worth of these NFTs that he owned. And basically he had these artwork, which there's a picture of one of them right there, supposedly had all this value. And the platform that he was trading on, called OpenSea, he put out on Twitter saying that, hey, I've been hacked, can anybody help me? And OpenSea actually stopped trading for some of these hacked NFTs. Now, this creates, again, another kind of a philosophical question and issue, because if part of these NFTs and cryptocurrencies is that they're supposed to be decentralized, then OpenSea should not be able to step in and stop somebody who stole something from being able to sell it. That's centralized control. That's what it is. So anybody's like, well, that's not a big deal, they stole it. Whoa, 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 whoa. Then you don't actually understand what you're arguing then. If the whole idea is that somebody else can't exert control or enforce rules, again, this is part of why criminals really, really like crypto, because once you get it, it's yours. This guy was able to get back some of his stuff here, but again, it really calls into question some of these claims as whether it really truly is decentralized or not. And while the criminals could have then sold the NFTs on another platform, this one, OpenSea, kind of stepped in and stopped some of them. But then again, that again opened up these other questions, because other people had things stolen on that platform, and OpenSea, the trading platform, didn't step in those scenarios. So whose interests, and do you have to be just prominent enough? Do you have to be famous enough to be able to have somebody kind of look out for you? There's nothing to stop these fraud and bad actors to stop their activities in this world of decentralized currencies and digital assets. This stands in stark contrast to many countries in which there is these centralized parties that have, say, like at least in the United States, we have what's known as the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. If you invest money in a bank or a major financial institution that has FDIC backing, and if the bank fails or somebody steals the money out of the bank, up to a certain amount, the government or the central bank will step in and make you whole. So if you deposit up to $100,000 in, say, Bank of America in the United States, and somehow Bank of America fails, you just open up the newspaper one day and go, they're out of business. You're not out your $100,000 because the FDIC will make sure that you get your $100,000. You don't have that. You don't have any of that in this area. So as I come into my kind of concluding comments here, number one, recognize the amount of risk if you're looking to get into cryptocurrencies. Huge price volatility. Which currency are you even going to pick on? And the amount of risk with no protection. You have no protection of being defrauded. I would say this. for the amount of risk that you're undertaking, you better be getting an outlandish return on your investment if you think that you're going to try to get rich off of this thing or have it a store of value. You have many countries that are starting to clamp down on this. So while there's this promise of all the things that it could deliver, if a lot of the world decides that this is really harmful for the environment and creating problems for other people, then maybe they're not going to allow crypto mining. And so couple this with the fragmentation, because which currency is going to win out? There's hundreds of them now. And you don't necessarily need to have one win out over all of them, but having hundreds and hundreds is not good. It's going to make whatever promise of cryptocurrency, like, oh, one day it's going to replace the dollar, or one day it's going to be like this. Like, yeah, but which one of the 400 plus that there are? Well, I don't know. One of them's going to win. Like, yeah, slow your roll. Is it a commodity or is it actually currency? And this is a kind of an investment financial institution type of a question here. Cryptocurrency wants to be currency because that means mass adoption, and if everybody's using it with a limited number, and again, thank you for somebody who corrected me there. I said initially 18, but it's 21 million for Bitcoin there. If there's only 21 million and everybody's trying to use it, that's going to keep the value up. But if between the price volatility, it starts to act more like a commodity, then it's less likely going to be adopted as a currency. And so, again, maybe someday it could be mass adoption here, but are we talking 5 years? Are we talking 10 years? Are we talking 200 years? And the more currencies that you have, and the more trading platforms that you have, coupled with the amount of price volatility and risk that you have, coupled with the potential for hacks, mean that these grandiose claims are probably way off into the future. And that's where we circle back around to my Peter Thiel comment. They promised us flying cars, but all we got was 140 characters. Now, granted, he's referring to Twitter when he said 140 characters. And yes, I know Twitter's now more characters, but he made that statement, that quote, before Twitter, allowed for people to make longer tweets. But the idea that the promise doesn't actually, line up with what is actually delivered is a problem for all of tech. And I teach primarily in San Francisco, where I'm, immersed, and many of my students are, it's the land of the tech startup, land of venture capital, lots of enthusiasm around tech startups. I oftentimes have to kind of play the role of kind of like the wet blanket, where like I have to be like, whoa, hold on, before you get sucked into the hype, be careful. So those grandiose claims, be careful of those. So lastly, basically I just like to do my quick little plug of like one of the things I just love about teaching at HALT, and the idea that we have experiential learning through most of our classes. We got global campuses, global student body. We balance between giving you those quantitative skills along with the hard and the soft skills, and you get to engage with a lot of your professors that are practicing professionals or publishing academics. It's noted that I'm publishing on Coinbase. I published several case studies that I use in many of my classes, so you get to interact with people actually doing the work here. And we do have a lot of unique classes that other schools just don't have. And so while I'm trying to conduct this, and I'm literally at the last minute or two here, notice that somebody had asked, is there actually classes in cryptocurrency and things like that? Yeah, we actually do have some classes that are going to go beyond what I could do in 40 minutes here. Cryptocurrency, blockchain, we got some unique classes that do not exist at other schools. Neuromarketing, luxury marketing, creativity, innovation. Other schools might offer, say an MBA, but they don't have some of these unique curriculum. And the curriculum is what gives you the advantage in your career. So, literally my closing comment, Professor Matt Fisher, if you have any questions, you are free to send me emails or engage or anything like that. I teach across a wide variety of disciplines: marketing, management, operations, economics, international business, and philosophy. You name it, I'll cover it. Now, if you want to talk about quantum physics, though, I don't have a lot to say about that because I don't know anything about that. So trust me, I won't make comments on things that I don't know anything about. But other than that, I want to thank you for your time here, and I'm going to open this up to, basically questions.
Thank you very much, Professor Fisher. I guess I've never seriously thought of the risks of being in a decentralized financial system. It's very, very insightful. Thank you very much. There was a question in the chat, and Jimo is asking, how do we mitigate against all the risks mentioned?
Could you say that one more time? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, how do we mitigate against all the risks mentioned? I mean, this could be a technical question, but
Okay. So here's one of the problems. Some of those risks you just kind of can't. It depends upon which risk we're talking about here. So if we're talking about, say, the risk of the fragmentation, that there's going to be more currencies out there. Let's say you buy one of these type of cryptocurrencies and you're like, well, what about the risk that I bought the wrong one? That's more like a systemic risk. That's just something you can't control. Now, one of the risks that you can control, so let's reference back to All My Apes Are Gone, the one with the NFTs there. One of the criticisms that this gentleman was open to was that people jumped in and he maintained his digital assets on the OpenSea platform. So many of these trading platforms will actually, kind of like a brokerage account, they will hold the asset for you. Now, I didn't go into this, but you need a digital wallet is something that you need, and that's something we would get into in like a little nano class or something. But you need to have a digital wallet. Now, the digital wallet is something that you can maintain on your computer hardware yourself, or you can have one of these trading platforms maintain it for you. So Coinbase, when I'm doing the case study on, they maintain digital wallets for people who want to just kind of dabble into cryptocurrency. And again, it kind of acts like a trading account, a digital brokerage type of a thing. Some of these platforms take security very seriously because they understand that if they get hacked, it dramatically undermines their business. And it could kind of be the end of them, as everyone's like, whoa, don't trust them anymore. The other thing you can do is actually maintain the asset and physical hardware on your machines. So instead of holding it in Coinbase, I decide that I want my crypto on my hard drive on my computer, and when I turn my computer off, ain't nobody able to access it. So it's physically on my machine. But hold on, while that might sound like a perfect solution, slow your roll. I didn't put it in the slide deck here, but there's famously a guy, I think he's in New Jersey. He bought a bunch of Bitcoin early in Bitcoin, and then he forgot about it. He bought it in the really early days. He bought a bunch of Bitcoin. Then he realized that his Bitcoin is worth like $500 million now. Problem is, he threw out the computer. He's been trying for years now to get the local municipality to allow him to, I kid you not, this is not a joke, to allow him to go dig in the dump, because somewhere in a giant pit is his old hard drive with over $500 million worth of Bitcoin. And the city's like, it's not safe for you to go do that. And he's like, he's even wanting to offer bounties to let other people go dig in the dump, to go treasure hunting in a dump. So that's not a perfect thing, but that's one way that you could kind of hedge that bet a little bit. Also, one last thing, and I'll shift over because I see there's another question on around Africa here, is that, well, what about this price volatility? Some of the coins are trying to now, what they call, and this is way more complex than I can get into, so I'm going to give a partially satisfying answer here. They're trying to start to now tie their coins to what they call stable coins. So some of these cryptocurrencies are trying to tie it to, say, gold, to try to bring down the amount of volatility, because some of them realize that these price fluctuations are great for people who want to gamble. If you want to gamble, price volatility is your friend. But if you're looking to treat this as true currency, price volatility is not your friend. And so, tying it and making it much more stable means that people and businesses will be more likely to actually use currencies. So some of these risks, I'm going to rephrase that, a few of these risks you can mitigate, but most of them, I got to be honest with you, are beyond the individual's control. And that's the dirty underbelly that we have to be honest about. And that's the thing as a professor. That's one of my biggest criticisms of most of the cryptocurrency, as I call it, the industry, because that means cryptocurrencies and the trading platforms. They're not being honest with people. They're not being honest with the amount of risk that they're undertaking. So one of the jokes that I make oftentimes to students, which I guess I'll do right now, I go, if you're thinking of cryptocurrency for the amount of risk that you're undertaking, I would like to make some other suggestions as some probably equally risky investments. Consider cryptocurrency, or consider, I don't know, scratch off lottery tickets. Vegas is potentially a good investment too, because they'll at least give you drinks while they take your money. And I only make those jokes because I'm trying to drive home, think about the amount of risk that you're taking. If the money you're investing in crypto is money that you can afford to lose, then totally fine. But would I put my retirement account in crypto? Oh, hell no. I mean, that's insane. So, there's a question I see, question of cryptocurrency, can it work in Africa and other countries that may not have a good system to keep the value of their currency? Zachary, I think that is actually a really good question. And in fact, you do have, number one, you do have, I think it's El Salvador has decided to actually recognize crypto, and actually their government is investing in crypto. And you do have a couple of other countries that are dabbling with and might decide to create their own country-specific cryptocurrency, which is a way to kind of control or maybe legitimize their money supply a little more. And in that regard, I do think that there might be some promise there. So when I say optimistically skeptical, this is one of these where my skepticism moves a little more into some optimism, because if you do have a country with a relatively weak currency or currency controls, then perhaps there would be more trust in the system if they were to move over into a digital asset, decentralized system. So I do think that the question of, like, some places in Africa with, again, volatile currency might find that there really is some benefits to embracing cryptocurrency that there wouldn't be in other places. So, anybody else here? Let me see here. Try to make sure that I get everybody here. Do you think the risks currently involved with the present cryptocurrencies outweigh the benefits? Oh, so that's a great question, Sarah. I think, Sarah, the way that I would frame this is that, boy, it's a great question here. You know, benefits versus the risks. For me, I would say that there are some potential benefits, and you know, they are real, and I do think that this movement is not going to go away. However, the one thing I would say is, crypto going to replace, again, the one that we've seen is the US, at least for me in the US, that crypto is going to replace the US dollar. Those people, I think, are insane. like the level of adoption and acceptance that would be required to replace the US dollar, like, get out of here. You're crazy. I mean, we have so many other issues. I think that one of the major problems that has to be overcome, though, for crypto to really go beyond this kind of niche fringe, is that the environmental issue has to be tackled. I mean, the amount of electricity and environmental impacts to mine digital assets, it's borderline unethical. No, it isn't borderline. It just is. It really needs to be addressed, and the number and proliferation of the currencies is really problematic. So I think that there are some benefits. I will say this in response to Sarah's question. I think that crypto stands the most to benefit by credit card companies. Credit card companies offering consumers rewards for use and transactions. If you could get, 1% cash back by using your American Express, or you could get, I think there's a Visa card that offers, I believe it's 8%, 6 or 8%, I forget, I read it real quickly, 6 or 8% given back to you as rewards in crypto. That if I was going to place a bet, that's the avenue, I think, to the most legitimization of cryptocurrency and widespread adoption. So if American Express and Visa and MasterCard and all these, and Discover and all of them get together and they start making lots of credit cards with reward programs that give you rewards in crypto, then I think you'll see crypto go more mainstream, gain wider acceptance, and it might allow some folks to use the rewards. Like if you got a reward and it's in something price volatile and you lose a little bit of your reward or it goes wildly up, it's not that big of a deal. So I think that's probably the avenue that I would kind of, say I think that's the way forward. I could be wrong. I could be totally wrong. Can regulations make it work better? From David. It might, but here's the issue. Part of the whole argument for crypto is that it's without regulation. So if you're going to add regulations to it, then what's the freaking point? And I tried to say that as kindly as I can. Be like, then what's the point of it? One of the things that whenever I have talked to groups of students about crypto, I start off with this. I challenge them with a question. And I start off with one where I've got some responses for it, but I go, isn't crypto really a solution that's desperately searching for a problem? And I say that because, at least here in the United States, we have lots of libertarians are generally this idea that government just equals bad. They just don't like government, period. If government is bad, then crypto is amazing because it gets out of government influence. But if you want to make crypto actually work, you need centralized control and regulations. Then that, again, it negates the argument for it. So I think regulations could make it work better, but then you just don't even need it at all because you already have currencies that work in many parts of the world. There is an idea that because of COVID-19 and the increase of money printing, cryptos did bloom, and now that price decreased. My question is, if rate goes back to 1.75, where it was before the shutdown, would it end crypto? Oh, Castro, you literally asked the question I just didn't think I'd have enough time to get into. Yeah, and I don't want to give people investment advice, but most of the run-up in crypto's value, particularly in Bitcoin's value in 2021, I think so initially, at the start of 2021, there was a prediction that Bitcoin would go to 100,000. It only went to about 69. And in fact, it's been falling recently. It's been falling because a lot of investors have been thinking that the money that was spent by governments, that's why I showed that money spent for the COVID stimulus and all that sort of stuff, people having access to money. As people have more money, they're out there spending it on goods and services. The argument is that inflation is going to take off because people have more money than they know what to do with. Now, from an economics perspective, I'd say the problem is not quite so much that people have more money, it's the fact that the supply is constrained. That's where most of our inflation has been coming from, is the fact that there's just not workers, or there's not semiconductors to make certain products. It's not the fact that people are sitting on way more money than they know what to do with. It's the supply is constrained. So once they start to kind of return to normal, and the runaway and rampant inflation that people have been oftentimes prognosticating, do we have some inflation? Yes. But the level of inflation that they're trying to make their arguments on, like as though the United States is going to have 100% inflation. Put the crack pipe down. No. There's no evidence for that. You're literally talking crazy. We're having 6 and 7% inflation here in the United States, and people's hair is on fire. I mean, they're just going nuts over that. I do think that there's going to be significant downward pressure on many of your cryptocurrencies when things start to return to normal, when they find out that all the inflation that they were predicting was going to happen, which is the same prediction they made during the Great Recession, during the dot-com boost. Anytime you have a major event disruption where a government might step in to try to soften the blow a little bit, you're always going to have some people come out and say, oh my God, the inflation's going to take off. And be like, yeah, the problem is the evidence never aligns for that. So I do think that there is going to be a lot of downward pressure on, at least in Bitcoin, and at least probably the next year to year and a half, because it's just way too high. Let's see here. Some schools of thought crypto really gets bad. Governments, particularly in developed countries, would intervene. I'm not quite sure what the question is there as far as when you say it gets really bad. You do already have governments starting to intervene in some scenarios. Like I said, China stepped in to stop the mining activities because they're just springing up, and small communities who had plenty of electricity supplies suddenly find themselves, their electricity usage just skyrockets, and then they're like, whoa, suddenly our hospital doesn't have enough electricity. Why is that? Oh, because these people over here are trying to mine crypto. Shut them down. If the government don't know and can't control the source of fund, is it cool to say crypto can't be controlled and it can equally be used to fund extreme groups?
Professor, for sure. We're
Yes.
getting a lot of questions, so if you want to pick a couple last ones and wrap things up.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. How do the government get to know how to discontinue? So I think one of the big things here. So I'm going to partially answer the one question in the chat there. Basically, it's kind of like, how do governments know how much cash businesses generate? Well, famously, at least in the United States, I know this is applied to other countries as well. Some businesses run on cash, and so they think that they can hide their business activities. Well, famously, at least in the United States here, how do you catch and punish a car wash who gets all cash? They look at the amount of water. And they're like, well, X amount of water is used per wash of a car. You use X amount of water, and you claim that you only did this much business, but the water usage doesn't line up with what you claim, ergo, you are cheating. Kind of the same thing with electricity consumption. The amount of electricity that these Bitcoin mining operations are using is just off the charts. So power providers can figure out exactly who's mining really quickly by noticing the spike in electricity usage and where it came from. They're like, it was, and here's the address. They're doing something at that address, and so they can track that stuff down. And you've got some of these trading platforms are now, at least in the United States, Coinbase is publicly traded. So they have to conform to the SEC. So that gives a degree of oversight. So governments can delegitimize these by clamping down on them, which could make them go underground. But if they go underground, then they're less legitimate. So that does create a problem. Is it likely that scammers might be undercover as a crypto company? And if so, is it common in society? So that from the anonymous question there, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. One of the things that I didn't put into the slide deck here, because I thought I'd be limited in time, and I definitely am, is looking at who actually owns crypto. And right now, if you think that wealth inequality is a problem, and if you don't think it's a problem, I think you should have your head examined. Wealth inequality is a problem. And the overwhelming majority of folks that own crypto are wildly wealthy. They overwhelmingly own like 80% of all crypto coins are owned. So they've already got the wealth concentrated. They're trying to get the rest of the masses to accept crypto, which will push its value up even more. And wealthy people already have most of the wealth anyway, and then you're going to move into crypto where they'll control even more of it. That has really significant society problems. So my last comments here, as I kind of cap off, because we're definitely way past on time here, is I would say be optimistically skeptical. I do think that crypto is not going to go away permanently, but is it going to go super mainstream and replace countries' currencies? I find very little evidence that that's actually ever going to come to pass, other than as a marketing tactic for unsophisticated people, who are just like, oh my God, yeah, the US dollar is going to go away and it's all going to be crypto and we're all going to have flying cars. Like, slow your roll. I mean, if that is going to come to pass, we're now projecting so far into the future that we may as well predict that humans are going to grow wings and fly around too. I mean, why not? I mean, if you're going to predict that far into the future, what the heck? Why not? So I just want to say to everybody, thank you for attending. I would just say this: if anybody has other questions, I put my email address up there. I'm a Halt professor, so you can reach out to me further, and maybe someday, I'll have you guys in one of my classes. So other than that, I'll turn it back over to Abdullah.
Thank you very much, Professor Fisher. Yes, if you could put your email, that would be great. I think there are a few questions that we missed on. Some of them are technical, so I'll leave it up to you if you want to answer that or not. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in and being a great and engaging audience. We got a lot of questions towards the end. Unfortunately, we've got to wrap things up. So as mentioned earlier, the recording will be shared in a few days. So please just keep an eye on the email, especially your spam folder, since this could include a link. If we haven't answered any questions, again, Professor Fisher is going to put his email, so please feel free to reach out. That said, I wish you a great evening. Thank you very much again, Mr. Professor Fisher, and have yourself a great day.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody.